Bonjour, Namaste, Shalom. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's conversation with Ms. Smita Mishra, author of Lt Col Purohit, The Man Betrayed, published by Vitasta. Ms. Mishra is an experienced journalist reporting on internal security, terrorism, politics, and current affairs. She started her career with a local news organization in Jammu and Kashmir. And over the years, she has worked with several media organizations like the HT Group, Dainik Bhaskar, Amar Ujala, and the Free Press Journal, to name a few. She also has her own weekend show on DD English. Smita ji, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you for asking me. Very kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me start with the first question. How would you describe your book in 30 to 40 seconds to someone who hasn't read it yet?
Yes, so it's a tough job, but I'll try my best. I'll just give a perspective about the fact that there was this period in Indian politics. It is still not completely over, but there was this short period, typically during the later half of the UPA 1 and the UPA 2 regime in India, politically speaking, when Hindu terror was the headline across all media and the topic of conversation. And as was expected, foreign powers also got involved in it. It was a subject which spanned across the political arena, the society, our youngsters, the news media, of course, then foreign agencies took interest, and everybody seemed to be focused on it. Now, we have enough evidence, and later political developments and other security-related developments have also given enough indication that all that noise that was created about Hindu terror, there really didn't come out, nothing really came out of it. So, but the problem is, if today, a youngster today who was born late and say 10 years down the line, if you search for the internet to access information on Hindu terror, you will find it is flooded with info about the so-called Hindu terror in India, Hindu extremists trying to create a country where nobody else is allowed to live and such things. But if you try to see the other side of the picture about this Hindu terror being actually a well thought conspiracy, you have very little material. But I was a news reporter who was hands-on, following the events day to day as part of my job. So it really set me thinking that 10 years down the line, even today, if you meet some of the youngsters, they are not very familiar with the names of Colonel Purohit, Swami Asimanand, and other people. So imagine what will be the situation 10 or 20 years down the line. People who access information will only be privy to information from one side, and they will know nothing about what really happened. So that inspired me to decide that there must be some documentation, some literature, which will give the other side of the picture so that people tomorrow are not fed what a certain section of politicians or vested interests or enemies of the nation want us to believe. There must be documentation and literature from both sides so that people are able to make an informed decision. And that is what inspired me to put the other picture. And that is why a lot of people have argued, oh, why did you balance it with what the other side is saying? I said, hello, this is not a news copy published in a newspaper. I am not supposed to balance a news copy here as news reporters do. This is a book where one needs to take a position. There is enough material, more than enough material, telling us about what the other side of the picture says. What about this side? So that is the effort to document what happened before people forget about it. And they are fed only one side of the picture, which led me to start working on the book.
And the protagonist of your book, as is evident from the name, is Lt Col Purohit. Why focus on him? When I started reading the book, you shared that he was not willing to be interviewed. He was not, interested. I thought, how is she going to write a book about him? So why did you decide to focus on him? You could have focused on, for example, other people who were more colorful and got more attention in the media. Why him?
Yes, very obvious question. And I must explain this because I know this is a question which has been going on in the minds of a lot of people. And like you, a lot of people, including my very close friends, put this question to me. You know, they were blunt enough to ask me if I had an old family association with the colonel, or if, he wanted me to write this book for him, or if there was a certain political or military, connection. The fact remains that neither family nor professional connections connect me to Colonel Purohit in any manner, except the fact that the time when he was taken into custody and the later period I was serving in my own way as a news reporter, and it raised a lot of questions in my mind, which I have already put in the preface and later chapters. Now, about choosing Colonel Purohit, there are some very natural reasons. For one, he was not one of those political activists or among the other people, okay? His was a very, very different profile. He is a serving army officer even today. And I have no hesitation in saying that among his contemporaries, he is one of the most promising officers and was slated to go very, very far up in the hierarchy of the Indian Army. And a complete die-hard patriot with a certain background in his family, in his legacy. So putting all these reasons together, and someone who was very clear about his ideas and thoughts. So you see, from that to be made the face of Hindu terror. The other reason was because this entire story of Hindu terror, this whole episode, if you see, it is Colonel Purohit's face which is flashed everywhere. For many years, when you talked of Hindu terror, there was one face which would come on your screen. So this very, very dedicated, die-hard patriot of a person, a serving Indian Army officer, was made to become the face of this so-called Hindu terror all over the globe. There were too many angles involved here, and so therefore, if we need to understand this entire phenomenon, we have to see it from the prism of Colonel Purohit's case, is what I felt, more than anybody else. And because he is a thorough army officer, a true blue soldier, he is the last one who will talk about it on his own or encourage anybody to talk about it, because he believes in his discipline. He believes that he is an army person. It's his job to serve the country and not talk about it. Unlike politicians who are groomed to be articulate. So for all these reasons, I thought it was necessary to document this conspiracy of Hindu terror from the standpoint of Colonel Purohit more than anybody else.
Okay. So what are 3 to 4 things you would want people to take away from your book? The book is interesting. Sir. I want everyone to read it, but what's the 3 or 4 most important things you want them to take?
So on the number 1, no matter how big the headlines, no matter how wide the charcha, as we say, the buzz across media platforms, please do not buy everything that is fed in the media blindly. And this I am saying, being someone whose daily bread is earned from journalism. I have no other professional abilities except a news reporter. I have been in the profession for, it's going to be nearly 3 decades now, almost at the cusp of 3 decades. Being a complete hardcore news person, I am saying this. Please do not buy blindly what is fed in the media. Please apply your mind. Please think twice about what you see and try to analyze, try to put 2 and 2 together yourself as intelligent citizens, as intelligent global people. And that is one. And secondly, that sadly for all of us, very, very unfortunate that political considerations and other considerations sometimes stoop so low that even compromising with our national security is not a no-go for some people. We have to be very, very alert, very, very cautious, and keep our eyes open for some elements. Because if people of the country are not ready to buy it, no conspiracy can succeed. Beyond a certain time.
Okay, so let's get into the specific things in the book then. On page 2 of the book, you say that Lieutenant Colonel Purohit is, and now I quote you, perhaps one of the most maligned, tortured, and abused men I had ever met in my life. That's a very strong statement. Could you explain to our audience why you say that?
No, there's not really much to explain. The people who are listening to us and who will be listening later on this link will be able to understand what I wanted to say if they just go through the headlines during that period. If they look at the headlines and see what is being written about him. You see, forget about my book. I am no authority. I have only done a news reporter's job and put certain facts which were floating around for a long time and put them together, because there are people aware of the case who already know these facts. But there is a very, very large number of people in the country and abroad who have not been able to look at it from, putting things together in perspective. And what happens to youngsters who are not even around yet, or they are too young? By the time they grow up, they will not be knowing what happened. So I have just done a news reporter's job and put things together. But forget me. You look at what is happening in the courts. After spending 9 years in jail, Colonel Purohit finally managed to get a conditional bail from the apex court, from Supreme Court, and till date he goes to court every day. There are day-to-day hearings going on for like how many years now? From 2008 to 2023. And has anything been proved yet? So I think the facts speak for themselves.
Okay.
Have the agencies been able to prove anything yet in any of the cases? No.
Right. So let's
look at this. It is the process is the punishment. I mean, look at what he has gone through and because of him, what the whole family has been through. They are still going through it.
As I read the book, I got the same sense that you just described in very, very precise words. The process for him is the punishment, right? 9 years in prison, and then, of course, all the headlines that were published about him. But tell us about your first impression of Lieutenant Colonel Purohit. In the book, you go into a lot of detail about your first impression. What were you expecting and what did you see?
Yes, so I really didn't, let me be very honest here. I really didn't meet him. Ideally, I should have met him, considering my curiosity for the whole issue, on the whole subject. I should have met him sometime soon after he got bail. But it could not happen because, as I said, he is a true blue army officer who shuns meeting people totally. And if he hears it's a news person, he will flatly refuse to meet. He is very cautious of the fact that he should not be seen interacting with the media. And secondly, for practical reasons, it could not happen. Eventually, I was able to meet him few years after his bail. So I didn't really go with much hope, considering the whole background and knowing that he is not a person who is very articulate and wants to, talk about his case. And to be honest, he didn't talk about his case to me at all. Forget about details, not even the larger picture. His only insistence to me was that you are a news reporter. If you are interested in writing on this subject, you please do your own due diligence, and you find your facts. I'm not going to facilitate anything because it's the matter is in court, and I'm not going to share any details. If you want, you can speak to my lawyers, which later the lawyers also were not willing to speak to me much, perhaps because of the sensitivity of the case. But on a human level, on an individual level, I was expecting to see a person who would be quite bitter and broken, and being 9 years in jail and all that. I don't want to go into graphic details, but you can imagine the situation. But the person I saw was just the opposite. I think I've never seen a person with such a positive mindset, with such a, so much pride about the army. I think his attachment with the army almost, borders on worship. He's so dedicated to the Indian Army, and his complete patriotism and his calmness. Now, these were things I was not expecting, because just look at the background of the individual. See what the person had gone through. Had some changes not happened, the person might as well have spent his life in jail. We still don't know what will happen, because there is no decision yet in the trial court. So looking at all that, it was a very, very unexpected package of a personality. And I have tried to bring it out in few words in the beginning of the book. I'm not sure I've succeeded much. It's not really as I don't think I've been able to express myself as well as I would have liked to, but still, if you read the book, you would understand what I'm trying to say. So I think the very attitude of the person, his demeanor, his calmness, his passion to serve the country, even after what he has gone through. Imagine, he should have actually been quite an irritated, broken man by then. So yes, it was quite, it took me a while to really understand his personality. It was so unexpected to speak to him.
And for me as a reader, I can tell you that you painted a very good picture very vivid picture of him. And then
Thank you, that's very kind.
Then when you describe the torture, and I'm glad you did not go into the graphic details on this interview, readers can read it in the book. That was, I can tell you that the big contrast in his personality and in the torture was something that people should read in the book. But let's move to the next question. Your book points the finger, not just a finger, but a very big hand. Your book points at Colonel RK Srivastava. Can you explain to our audience who Colonel RK Srivastava was, and what do you see his role in the case?
See, as far as RKS is concerned, I have not sort of given any breaking news in my book. RKS' role was under the cloud from the day this arrest happened, and rightly so, because we can go on blaming the ATS and the politicians of the country, but let us not forget that the person who was more than willing to implement all the conspiracy at the ground zero started with a person who was ideally a colleague of Colonel Purohit. His role was always under cloud. It has always been under cloud, and questions will continue to be raised. And the reason I have named Colonel RK Srivastava is because there are government documents, there are other documents, there are court documents very, very clearly spelling out, sort of raising questions about how the whole operation was put into effect. And so I have not given any breaking news, Professor. I have just put things in the perspective, because there were they were there in a disjointed form in different news copies here and there. And even the petitions filed by Colonel Purohit in the National Human Rights Commission, in the NHRC, and most particularly the two courts of inquiry, the COIs conducted by the Indian Army, have given have furnished in very clear terms the fact that the whole thing started with Colonel Srivastava going to Madhya Pradesh and, picking up Colonel Purohit and bringing him to Mumbai and keeping him in what we can now call as an illegal detention, because at least for nearly a week, he was not shown to be arrested, but kept there in a safe house. And you know how he was tortured, and the effort was to make him confess to the blast, which he stuck to his guns and did not succumb.
In the book, you described that even the picking up and taking to Mumbai was under false pretense.
I'm sorry, please come again. Your voice is breaking, Professor.
That even the taking him to Mumbai was under false pretense. He was misled about where he was taken and then taken to Mumbai. In the book, you describe that, right?
Yes. So that's a long story. It will be difficult, in this conversation to give all the sequential details. It's all there in the book, but there are a lot of other people in the country who know these details very well. So, yes, that is why I have been saying from the beginning, the role of a lot of other people was very, very suspect. And if Colonel Purohit was involved in any way, his behavior should have been different. Now that if you look back in hindsight, you will realize had he really been involved, his behavior would have been different. And this is not an impression I'm saying. I'm not an expert in these matters. These are things I have gathered from people during, the process of writing the book, who spoke to me. And I really want to add one line here for those who are listening and for future record, that when you read any book, you find a long list of acknowledgements. Unfortunately, in my book, there is a long list of people I want to really thank from the bottom of my heart. Sadly, I cannot name them here, because they are people in the intelligence network, they are people in the security establishment, they are people related to the case in some or the other way, directly, indirectly. And there are a lot of people in very high positions in the army and the security setup. They cannot be named here. So I want to use this opportunity to thank them again without naming them. Because without them, I wouldn't have dared to, write on a sensitive subject like this.
Now Smita ji, let me move the conversation to another very interesting character in the book. People who read the book carefully will come across Hemant Karkare, former ATS chief, the one who died, for those people who don't remember, the one who died in the Mumbai attacks. Now in the book, you write that he was involved in torturing Lieutenant Colonel Purohit, and the words you use are vile abuses and threats while watching his men on something of army officer. What did you learn about Hemant Karkare's role in this whole saga?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
So one of the book that people might be very surprised about is Hemant Karkare, the former ATS chief. And in the book you say, I quote you, vile abuses and threats while watching his men try third-degree tortures on a serving army officer. What did you learn about Hemant Karkare's role in this whole saga?
Well, Professor, you know already, but I might like to repeat for the benefit of our listeners, that people who have not been interested in the subject at all might find it surprising. They might find it surprising. But people who have been tracking and following the story for very long will not find it surprising, because whatever I have written is already in the public domain. And and I don't want to keep this about Karkare, Professor, but the Mumbai ATS, the Maharashtra ATS was the agency that was used in this case to create this bogey of Hindu terror, whether in the case of Colonel Purohit or anybody else. It pains to know that because Colonel Purohit was himself an army officer, a person who, like them, is serving the nation to protect us from our enemies. So it just makes it so starkly paradoxical. That's all. But the Maharashtra ATS role, the Maharashtra ATS role in this entire situation is there for everyone to see.
And I encourage our listeners to read about this in detail in the book. But let's move on to the next thing. And this got my attention. On page 95, you write, one of the brightest officers of his generation was languishing in jail. His wife and son running from pillar to post for justice, swallowing the tag of a terrorist family day in and day out. End of quote. Based on your research, what is the problem in the system that allowed something like this to happen?
So that is why I say that it is, it is no use blaming one officer of the ATS or even the Mumbai ATS office or any one or two people in the Indian Army, though all of them played a role in one way or the other. But it's not, we always have to keep the larger picture in the mind in the interest of the nation. We always have to learn from what happened in the past to prevent any such happening in the future, which might, knowing the politics and the desperation of some political powers and the desperation of some enemies of the nation operating from abroad, it can happen again. So we need to be very, very cautious. And for that purpose, I am saying that is why I want to repeat that there's no point blaming one officer of the ATS or even the ATS team or one or two persons. This was a very, very well thought political game plan with many far-reaching goals in mind. And unfortunately for us, they did succeed they succeeded in it for some time. They would have gone on had not the people of the country risen up. And at the end of the day, I believe that even if people in the security system here and there were ready to cooperate for either, for petty selfish interests or for some pecuniary or ulterior motives, the fact remains that the actual, the buck must stop with the political leadership of that time.
When you read this book, the other person who comes across as a hero in the book is Aparna Purohit, the wife of Lieutenant Colonel Purohit. You devote a full chapter to her. Tell our audience a little bit about Aparna Purohit. She almost comes across like this Sita-like figure in the book. Is that the sense you got?
Yes, had the situation allowed and if I had had more details, I would have rather devoted the book to Dr. Aparna Purohit rather than the Colonel. And that is because I believe you have named Sita, and I have a branch of my family, my in-laws, they are from Mithila. So we who have our roots in Mithila, my husband's family is from Mithila. And my own family's roots are also not very far from there, just across the river. So for us, Sita is our loving daughter, more than a goddess. For Mithila Vasis, Sita is our loving daughter. And since you mentioned Sita ji, I must say that women like Aparna Purohit are trying to imbibe both Sita and Rani of Jhansi together, because the times are different now. And yes, though there were a lot of stalwart lawyers ready to argue for the colonel, though I must say in the beginning they had a lot of trouble getting good lawyers because, because of the situation around and the fact that he was a serving army officer accused in a case of terror. Not many lawyers were brave enough to come forward, but eventually they got some very big legal luminaries to fight for them. But till date, I stick to my point that it was Aparna Purohit who is still his biggest lawyer, and in the courts and in life. And she not only managed to put together her own life after this huge jolt to the family, but she managed to keep the family together. But more than that, she managed to stand up and fight for the colonel when nobody else was ready to come forward. And even though the case is still on, we know that nothing has been proved in the law courts. More than 200 witnesses, I am told, have turned hostile. So you can imagine the status of the case. But if the colonel is out on bail and is fighting fistily for himself, I think the first credit must go to Dr. Aparna Purohit. And she is a woman of steel. You might find her very soft-spoken and very dainty in her demeanor, but she is just the opposite when it comes to her resolve and her hard work. And I do believe that, and this is something the colonel himself has never hesitated to put on record.
See, when I was reading your chapter about her, I could not help thinking that somebody should make a movie on this whole saga from her perspective, and from her sort of her as the main character. And I thought it would be so interesting to see this woman sort of fight against the system for her husband and for sort of what she believed in. But another thing that caught my attention in the book was 9 years in captivity, and yet when he was freed, he went back to the army. And his son also wants to join the army, his younger son. What do you think explains such commitment to the army in this family?
Yes, so just look at this and you can make out if he should really be branded a terrorist. Just put these things together in an intelligent way and you will realize what I have been trying to say. And a lot of people before me have said it. I've just put those things together. Why do you think? Okay, I'll take a few seconds to explain this situation, and I think it will be crystal clear once I put this out. You must have seen the case of an army officer, more than one. I mean, a group of army officers in Nagaland. You must have seen the case of a couple of army officers in the Kashmir Valley. In the past, you must have heard of cases in Assam and other places. And those were very, very, I mean, if you compare the offense, those were very, very small things to have happened. Okay. But you saw the action the Indian Army has taken, which proves that when it comes to public dealing, when it comes to discipline or any criminal offense, our army is perhaps the toughest in the whole world. Our army has never hesitated to take action, no matter how senior the officer, no matter what his past record is. When it comes to any criminal offense, our army is so strict about it. I can give you half a dozen examples right away, and there are many more. But it's the same Indian Army. It's that same Indian Army which gave total protection and security to the colonel from the moment he came out of Taloja jail in Mumbai till he reached the army station and later his family home. Till today, he has security and he continues to be a serving army officer after having been in jail for 9 years in a case of terror, of waging war. All right, I don't think there can be a more serious offense than that. I mean, I just want to say, and I cannot repeat it enough, Professor, to think that an Indian army will not spare an officer who goes very slightly astray in controlling a people's protest. That same Indian army is having Colonel Prasad Srikant Purohit as a serving officer even till this date, after he was in jail for 9 years on a terror case. Is that not enough evidence of his innocence? Would the army have even tolerated him? Forget about giving him security and giving him, the most important assignments. He continues to serve as an intelligence officer till date. Imagine serving in the military intelligence the way he was serving earlier, after all this has happened. Is that not evidence enough? Does an intelligent person need to know anymore?
So, with all the research that you did for this book, and I think it's somewhere you mentioned 1.5 years or something like that, did you find any evidence suggesting that Abhinav Bharat or any other Hindu organization was involved in terror plots against the country?
I'm sorry, Professor, you'll have to speak again. There are a lot of breaks in the voice.
With all the research that you did for this book, did you find any evidence suggesting that Abhinav Bharat or any other Hindu organization was involved in terror plots against the country?
No, not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. My research was based on Hindu terror, but while working on Hindu terror, my research was also focused on Colonel Purohit's case more than anybody else, because I was working from that perspective. But no, rather I found evidences to the contrary. There were perhaps organizations which were floated to create a confusion in the minds of the people. That is why I keep saying, and I cannot repeat myself enough, that there was a lot of thought and organizing and homework had gone into creating this conspiracy. If you look at it in a step-by-step manner, you will understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, your book did get me to read a lot of newspaper articles about it, but I still recommend your book to everyone who wants to read about this. Let me now open up the floor to the questions from audience. If there's
yes, I believe a couple of people, I'm sorry to interrupt, Professor. I think a couple of people want to join. They are unable to be admitted. If you could just check before we
I don't see anybody else in the waiting room yet.
Okay, fine. Maybe they have not logged in. Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe they haven't.
We are ready to take questions from the audience. Does anyone want to ask a question?
Hello, Smita ji. This is Vicky Lanjappa here. I'm audible, I hope.
Yes, but if you can be louder, that would be great.
Sure. Smita ji, I just wanted to know that this is a very tricky subject that you were writing on. That is one. Considering, matters in court and, there are a lot of ifs and buts on the subject. All the sides of the story, that is one thing is there. But I just want to know that, what are the challenges you face? Because I remember during the book launch, there were protests, etc. and all those things. So how did you handle that? Considering, okay, you called Dr. Aparna Purohit a hero. I mean, it must have been another moment for you also, right, to write the book, because it was a very controversial subject.
Okay, so I'll come to the last point first, then I'll go back to the other points that you have raised. Regarding bravery or courage, let me tell you that till my book was completely done and published, and it was out in the markets online as well as in the bookstalls, I had no clue I had done anything very, very special or brave at all. I took it just like I do all my other writing, and I was enjoying it. I was enjoying the process of writing, and I was very happy with with the fact that the book had finally come out, though it was much behind schedule. Still, I was very happy that I had finally been able to put it together with all the help from our publishers. But now, the first day when it suddenly struck me that it was something it's something different I have done, was when I started getting reports and calls for interviews from people in Pune and Mumbai. and I realized that a huge, a huge protest is being raised, and there are calls for bans on the book. And when I read those statements of the people, and more than anything, when I managed to reach Pune and I saw that deployment, it was such a, it struck me, it was like a brick hit me on the head. In a split second, I realized what I had done. It was like a jolt. It was a huge jolt to me. And I suddenly thought, oh, what have I done? When I saw the scale of the protest, the extreme thoughts that were coming from those protesters and the questions which were being put to me, and immediately it was a day of extremes. On the one hand, when I was told about the risks and the threats that were awaiting me in reaching the venue, and the other extreme was when I saw that jam-packed auditorium of people, of Pune people and people who had come from as far as Bangalore and elsewhere to join that Pune event. And I saw, it was not a feeling of interest. A feeling of interest is something I would expect from my readers if they have come to the function. There was a feeling of gratitude on them. And everybody told me only one thing: thank you, Smita ji, for writing. Thank you for having the courage to write it. We were waiting for someone to do it. And then there was this flood of messages, Vicky, from army persons, serving and retired, very young serving officers, as well as very senior veteran retired officers, some of them in their early 90s, some of them crossed 90 years, and their families, even their daughters and other children, and people, total strangers. Somebody calling me from Tripura and Assam and Kerala and Kashmir, complete strangers I had no clue about. I don't know how they managed to get my Twitter contact or my WhatsApp number or some way to connect to me, and only one line of message I could see: thank you for writing this. And your own city, Vicky, Bengaluru, I got a lot of messages, maximum messages from Bengaluru. So it was, it was neither, I felt no sense of courage in studying, in researching, in writing, even when it was published. This hit me only when I faced the public and I saw those extreme reactions and the scale of the protest and the kind of accusations that were laid at me, when I suddenly realized what I had done. So maybe the fact that I did not fathom, I did not gauge what I was doing was actually a blessing, because had I become conscious about what I was doing and about, I don't want to reveal those details here, but I was briefed by some very responsible people about the kind of elements and forces who are out targeting me after they have seen the book, because it exposes a huge global game plan. So when I learned about the kind of forces on whose target I have come, it was that moment when it hit me what I had done. Thank God these things did not come to my mind at the time of writing the book. Otherwise, perhaps I wouldn't have been able to do it at all.
Thank you, sir.
I guess at the time.
I don't care. Now I don't care. But Professor, I just want to add that Vicky Nanjappa is one news reporter in this country who was relentlessly after this Hindu terror conspiracy. I have referred to a couple of his stories in the book as well. And Vicky is not only one of the finest reporters on internal security that we have, but the first story which actually broke the headline that this may not actually be what it appears to be was broken by Vicky Nanjappa way back in 2008 or 9 when he was writing for the Rediff.
Wonderful. And maybe at some point we can interview Vicky ji for a different series about
Absolutely.
his role in this. But one of the questions we've gotten in the chat box is, that at some point you had mentioned that NIA and other agencies had ordered a halt on any activities related to this book. I was not aware of this. Chaitanya Arora has asked this in the chat box. Is that true? And if yes, how was your mental state during that period? What you spent years writing a book?
Yes. No, I understand. I think I understand. Let us not forget that the people are serving in the NIA, our premier investigating agency for internal security and terror funding and such things. The NIA is a thoroughly professional agency, and the people serving there, I know a couple of them I know quite a few of them. Some of them have been there from the very beginning, from its inception, and they are thorough patriots, and they are doing their job brilliantly well. I think they are, let us not forget that no matter what the sentiments of those investigating, the prosecuting officers, they are after all serving an agency, they are doing a job, and the matter is in court, and the NIA is the prosecution agency. So I think it is they have taken a call in the best interest. My only, if I may say, I wouldn't say complaint. My only curiosity is, whatever I have put in the book is things which have already been floating in the public domain for a long time. There are people in this country who got away with writing a book on Afzal Guru. There are people in this country who got away with writing a book on the fact that the Mumbai attack, the biggest terror attack on Indian soil, could be the work of Hindu nationalists. So people have got away with all this. And I have not even put anything that is really a sort of a jolt or anything. I have just put things which are known in a perspective, more keeping in mind the future generations who must have access to both sides of the picture. I have not even touched upon any sub judice matter. So I am just curious. However, I may like to add very clearly, and I don't want any ambiguity on this, Professor, the fact that the NIA is doing what it was set up to do finally. And if they have taken a position in the court, I completely understand. And the book is in the public domain. Whether I speak on it, whether we have a launching event or not, it doesn't matter at all. Because we are not people who are gunning after seminars and conferences. We are people who want to do an honest day's job and go home. And the book is out there. Please order the book if you still haven't. Please buy it from your neighboring bookstore or order it online and read it for yourself. There's no restriction on the sale of the book at all. And I'm quite sure there will never be. Because it just gives out the truth with a perspective of those times.
And I think you make a good point that what you did is you took information that was already in public domain, but you put it in the form of an interesting, engaging narrative that people can read and understand the situation rather than reading multiple articles about it. So
because people were unable to put 2 and 2 together, and they were blindly following headlines.
Right. Now you talked about, a few minutes ago, you talked about the passionate interest in the book when it first came out, and you saw packed at auditoriums. What was the commercial reception of the book? Was it along the lines of what you expected?
Well, I think that is a question my publisher will be the best to answer, because I do not still have the full picture with me, and I haven't really paid too much attention to it, because I think I will come to know when it's time to know about it. I can only share the sentiments of. I think it's a fair commercial sale for weeks and weeks, more than 2 months. It was the bestseller in the true, Amazon, by the way. Amazon has put it in what they call a true story genre. True stories genre, what they call true stories. So in the true story genre, it was leading the charts for God knows how many weeks. 2 months, 3 months, whatever. So it is a success commercially. I would wish that the commercial thing must not stop. It must go on. It must sustain so that more and more people come to know about it. But at the same time, I must say that while I am happy that the book is selling, and I hope that it will sell more and more in the coming days, what has touched me more than anything else, is the sentiments of the feedback that I have got. It was so overwhelming. Even today, when I get a few minutes to sit and reflect on it, my eyes become moist about the fact that how attached people felt after reading it. And not all of them have a services background. Some of them are from services background, certainly, but a lot of them are just common citizens who want to know what is going on in the country. And they appear to be very, very disappointed with the media for not putting it out there the way it should have been put out. Why only give out one side of the picture? So the sentiments that have come to me through feedback through various sources is actually what made me feel that I had really done something more than how much the book has sold.
And congratulations for being on the bestseller list. That is indeed an
Thank
honor.
you.
Now let me move to sort of the last three questions that we ask most of our people we interview. As a writer, who are the senior writers who inspire you? Are there any people who you read and you thought, I someday want to write like this when you were younger, or maybe today they are your inspiration?
As authors?
Yes.
Yes. So you see, it's different for depending on the subject and the field. Which field. I have a different set of likes when I read fiction. I have a different set of likes when I read philosophy, or I read a sort of a thriller. So there's no one name I can tell you, but I have been lately. I have not been reading much of fiction, and much. I think not at all. It's been years now that I touched a book on fiction. Sometimes I just flip through the books which are already there in my bookshelf for long, which I had bought many years ago. I just flipped through them. Lately, I have not purchased any book of fiction for a long time. Once or twice, I bought a couple of thrillers, but not much. So my reading these days is mostly concentrated on politics and things which happened in the past, and spirituality and philosophy. So I'm very happy to say that after going through so much in Sanskrit and Upanishads and thoughts and other philosophies beyond India, I have actually discovered something which should have been the starting point. But in my case, it happened the other way. After reading so much, I have now finally this year, I have suddenly discovered the magic of Ramcharitmanas. I used to think it was, I used to think there are higher philosophies one must read about. The Upanishads and the Ved, and they read the Gita in more and more ways as much as possible. It is an ocean. But I have realized, and today I can say with some conviction, that if the Ramcharitmanas has survived as India's the most popular document for centuries, it is because that magic is unmatched and better late than never. I wish I had started from there, but it actually happened the other way with me. After reading everything else, I have come back and I have suddenly discovered the magic of Ramcharitmanas. I am so hooked to it these days, and I hope our new generation, while they are catching up on reading so much else, national and international, everybody must try to get deep into the Ramcharitmanas. It is pure magic.
So Smita ji, on this issue of Ramcharitmanas, I would ask a slightly different question then. You and I are of the generation who was growing up, or perhaps were a little already grown up when the serial Ramayana came on TV first. Do you think that serial, the original Ramayan, did justice to the Ramcharitmanas in terms of characters or in terms of role models for society? Or you think one should actually read the book and forget about any sort of TV show made on it?
See, everybody should read the Ramcharitmanas. Everybody should read the Ramcharitmanas. There is no match to it. However, I must also say that Ramanand Sagar did do a great service to the entire country, to our generation, by making it in the audiovisual form, because he took it to every household. There is a Manas in every Hindu household. It's nothing new. But yet, he made it, he touched a chord with the people. And while I do believe that nobody can recreate the Manas after Goswami ji, I must say that the rendering of the Ramcharitmanas by Ramanand Sagar's team was perhaps, the nearest to that brilliance of the Manas that anybody could have done. So, yes, I do think that they have done a great service. And it is, that is why, just like the Ramcharitmanas, you never get enough of reading it. The Ramayan serial also, even now, when I watch it at this age, I had watched it as a schoolgirl. But even now, when I watch it, I feel so touched with every shot. I think he made it nearest to perfection.
Well, I'll be certain to pass on your kind compliments to the Sagar family. I think they'll be pleased to hear your compliments. Now, to the last two questions. What books are you reading these days? Any books you want to recommend to people?
I'll just say, I think RVS Mani, Mr. Mani is waiting. Perhaps he has a question or something. Can we connect to him?
Sure. RVS Mani, do you have a question?
I think he is muted.
Mani, do you have a question?
He is muted.
Okay.
I don't have a question, but it's a very interesting thing. We are concurring on all those, because what I said it was a narrative. Myth of Hindu Terror was a narrative. That was my first book. And subsequent to that, Smitaji has brought out the specific case of persecution, because a narrative was coming out. First, it was the attempt to brand Hindus as terrorists, patriotic army officers. See, it would have had Colonel Purohit not faced this situation at the age of a 34-year-old selection grade colonel, he could have certainly gone on to become a corps commander. He had this unfortunate thing not been loaded on him. But most of the veterans will agree, I have spoken to at least quite of them, maybe a chief of army staff. But unfortunately, things did not take that way. The conspiracy was Indian, the conspiracy was with a foreign hand, we do not know. Another very interesting thing, this is a very important point. Another is, first they tried to make Indians, Hindus as terrorists, which was foiled. Ganesha Icha, I was also a part of the process which foiled that. Then they brought in the communal violence bill, where the Hindus were intended to be branded as rioters and arsonists. That also did not take place. They had to shelve it. And now, again, the rationalist murder by Dr. Tadani is how Hindus have been. So this is a narrative which beautifully brought out by Smitaji about what is happening, how the Indian officers are now in the target at the behest of some foreign hand, some invisible hand, I would call it. And this has been beautifully brought out by Smitaji's book. I congratulate her, and I wish she could bring out more on this. About Ramacharita-manas or Ramayana, Valmiki, I am a Valmiki Ramayana fan. It's a beautiful narration of how the best Maryada Purushottaman. So it is not just for reading, not just for learning, not just for devotion, but the life of Maryada Purushottam has to be followed in the full steps, adhered to, the lessons should be adhered to. That is what is my submission. It is good that Smita ji has brought out this. We are also together in a different forum. I wish that both of them, I wish she could also bring out another book on Ramacharita beautifully in a sort of a form which even the secondary school children are able to learn the values of Ramayana, the lessons of Ramayana, and bring it out in a very sankshipt form. We will also, I can ensure that it is also translated to the Hindi and other languages. Thank you. Thank you, Smita ji.
Thank you, R.V.S. Maniji. Smita ji, I guess we are out of time, so let's move to the last question.
Yes.
Are you working on the next book? What is the next book?
No, not really. I haven't really thought about what to write next because I must, I just don't want to be a run-of-the-mill author, who keeps churning out, books after books, because to fill that churning passion, I am already a news journalist. I write enough for daily. So I don't have any, craving to write because I have so much writing to do. I sometimes get tired of writing. So no, I don't have a confirmed book idea in mind. There are some ideas floating at the back of my mind, but I have not come to a concrete call on them. However, I would, since you have, you have been kind enough to devote so much time to our subject, I may add here that right now we are, me and our publishers, we are engaged in the job of, giving final touches to the Hindi version of my book, Lieutenant Colonel Purohit. Because let me tell you that it was very, very touching, and while a lot of people, as I said, expressed so much gratitude about the fact that I had written this book, there was also a big number of people who complained because they wanted to read it in Hindi, and they said we are waiting for a Hindi version of the book. Aapne isko Hindi mein bhi kyun nahi kiya ek saath? So we had to factor that complaint, and keeping their sentiments in mind, we are about to give the final touches to the Hindi version of the book. So right now I'm more sort of involved in that. Once we are done with it, perhaps if God is kind, we will think of another subject. But let me add that I will only write my next book if and when I feel as strongly motivated and passionate about writing the way I felt for this subject. It was something I felt I just had to do before before God called me away, So if I feel that strongly enough on some subject, maybe, God willing.
Perfect. So Smita ji, hopefully when your Hindi edition of the book comes out, we will do another interview fully in Hindi about the book. But in the meantime,
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for giving us this time generously, for writing a wonderful book, and for illuminating us about Lieutenant Colonel Purohit. Many of us had forgotten or ignored about him, and your book brings him back to the limelight. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And I must tell your viewers who are watching and who will be watching the link later on the net, I must say that this book, Lieutenant Colonel Purohit, The Man Betrayed, it was a labor of love for me. But please do not read it as a book of interesting fiction. I know a lot of people have come and told me that the book runs like a movie. And when we flip through the chapters, we feel as if we are reading a very, very action-packed movie. I want to thank all those people who have complimented me by saying these words. Unfortunately, this is no movie script. It is something that happened to a real person, to a real family. Please keep that in your mind. And please do read the book if you still haven't. And for those who prefer the Rashtrabhasha, very soon you will have the opportunity to read it in Hindi also. Thank you very much, Professor, for your effort of talking about my work.
Thank you, Smita ji. And let me again say that you've been very generous in giving us your time, and I hope people enjoy reading your book as much as I did. With
No,
that,
it
have
was a
good
great
evening.
experience to speak with you. Namaskar.